Hi guys, I'm General Chaos and I'm celebrating 5 years of being on YouTube. I don't know why I keep having this problem with the audio. I'm really sorry about any inconveniences that I've been making. This is like the second or third time I've tried uploading this now, and for some reason the music has always been louder than the actual commentary from me. Really sorry about that. So yeah, I'm just going to keep this quick and simple. I'm reviewing every episode of Wacky Races for my 5-year anniversary. Yeah, I know I'm kind of taking pieguyrulz formula here, but from what I've seen, people have been using his formula for reviewing cartoons. One guy's even reviewing every episode of The Simpsons, so yeah. This is every episode of Wacky Races reviewed. Episode 1 of Series 1, Seesaw to Arkansas. This was a really nice episode to start the series on, in my opinion. Got to learn the characters pretty quickly, especially the Anthill mob, who we learned very quickly can be really sneaky in the right scenario. And we also learned that they're being chased by the police as well for crimes they never really explain, but it's kind of obvious that they've done something to get the police attention. It's also really funny as well because you expect Dick Dastardly to be the one that does all the like sneaky, devious schemes of getting people lost, but yet it's Clive from the Anthill mob that gets Dick Dastardly stuck in a pool of mud. Honestly, my favourite part's got to be the ending of this episode, with Dick Dastardly finishing in 4th place, or it's assumed he finishes in 4th place, just have his photo taken, because they literally have a photo finish because everyone's like really close to each other when they're trying to cross the finish line. But it's a really good episode. The only real problems I have with it are there's some like weird animation errors. I know Wacky Races is kind of old now, but something I didn't really notice before. Just after Muttley tries to detonate all the dynamite, you know, to cause like an avalanche to stop all the Wacky Races coming in, there's this scene where you can see the Bouldermobile, the Creepy Coupe and the Army Surplus Special driving past unscathed, and there's this part where the Army Surplus Special are just about to drive out of the like crevice or the canyon, whatever you want to call it, but they sort of like disappear into thin air instead of like just simply passing the other side to a point where you can no longer see them on screen, if that makes sense. Also, Penelope Pitstop's ponytail, you know, coming out of the helmet, that seemed to disappear a couple of times, especially in the scenes where she meets the 7 little dwarfs, even though it's just like the Anthill mob. It's kind of weird. Like I said, I know it's an old cartoon now, but some things like that always kind of distracted me, you know. But anyway, final thoughts. This episode gets a 9 out of 10 from me. It's a pretty solid episode. Episode 2 of Series 1, Creepy Trip to Lemon Twist. So this episode is actually really famous among the Wacky Races fanbase, as many people voted this the worst episode of the series. Honestly, I'm not entirely sure it deserves that title. I mean, don't get me wrong, I am fully aware of the ending, but I want to save that for a little bit later, and I just want to talk about all the stuff that I did like about this episode. My favourite part is when Dick Dastardly and Muttley tried to scare Luke and Blubber Bear when they try and like advertise Cuckoo Cooler in a saloon. Really brilliant scene because they like try to scare them, but they don't know that it's been haunted by 2 ghosts, and Dick Dastardly and Muttley are just there trying to scare them. They don't have the bed sheets on them anymore, and Luke and Blubber Bear just sort of like look at each other like, what the fuck is going on here? It's a really brilliant scene. And one thing that I never really noticed before, everybody seems to be like driving up to the saloon that was advertising Cuckoo Cooler, but then there's a scene later on where the creepy coop, like, they drop by that same saloon and they like scare the ghosts. Well, Big Gruesome does anyway, and it's just so weird that the episode did that, because it's like, I kind of already assumed that everybody would like move past the saloon now, but now everyone's approaching it again. Just really odd. Now for the ending of the episode. So Dick Dastardly and Muttley, they end up being disqualified from the race because apparently Dick Dastardly extends the front of the mean machine. This caused quite a stir in the Wacky Races fan base, because if you actually slow down that scene where Dick Dastardly, Penelope Pitstop and Creepy Coop cross the finish line, you'll notice Dick Dastardly doesn't extend the front of his car, but then you see the slow motion replay and it's like, no, sorry, that really didn't happen. And what's really interesting, and I found this out quite a while ago, on the DVD, if you like watch this episode, apparently they edited the episode so there was like loads of smoke as soon as the 3 cars that I mentioned earlier crossed the finish line. And apparently, to me, that just makes the whole episode even more suspicious. Like, that's just so weird that Hanna-Barbera turned around and chose to do that for the DVD. Like, why couldn't you just let Dick Dastardly win that race? I mean, he actually won fairly, you know? The episode gets an 8 out of 10 from me. Episode 3 of Series 1, Why Oh Why Wyoming. This episode is alright. I thought it was a little bit disappointing with Dick Dastardly trying to team up with the Indian chief who was trying to stop the Wacky Races from entering his land. Because it's like, as soon as Dick Dastardly meets the chief, nothing all that much really happens. Dick Dastardly doesn't help the chief out, the chief doesn't really help Dick Dastardly out, but at the same time, it's kind of funny as well, because just that scene with Dick Dastardly and Muttley being tied up to the cactus is pretty funny. And then they're trying to win the race on foot, which actually leads to this really weird race that the Wacky Races has, where later on Dick Dastardly tries to win as he's like trapped inside an ice cube, but I'll get to that a little bit later on. As the episode goes, it's kind of average, honestly, not really all that spectacular, but it's still a good episode at the very least. I like that with Dick Dastardly and Muttley setting up a giant rocket. It's funny because it's one of the instances where Dick Dastardly's plan actually goes right, but in this case it also kind of went wrong as well, because they both get blown up as well as the canyon. And it's actually kind of funny as well, because in that whole scene before patent pending, or during patent pending, like puts a bridge over the canyon so everyone can cross, it's really weird how that whole scene is drawn, because in the distance you can see like land, you know, where, because like there's the canyon, this giant hole, but a little bit further up, like the canyon actually starts to stop the hole, if that makes sense. And it's like the other Wacky Races could just like pass, they could go around the canyon, which is a bit odd, but anyway, it's still an alright episode. I give it a 7 out of 10. Episode 4 of Series 1, Beat the Clock to Yellow Rock. So this episode has a really weird beginning. Apparently the other Wacky Racers couldn't get past Penelope Pitstop, who at the time was in first, because it turns out there was a misunderstanding where everyone thought she was trying to make a left turn, but she was actually just waiting for a nail polish to like dry. I just thought, not one Wacky Racer like just thought to just overtake her from the right or fly over her. Seriously? There's also this really weird bit of the episode where everybody is about to exit this nature park, but a park ranger stops everybody from exiting because apparently bears keep sneaking into the back of people's cars. And I just thought, how could you not miss a bear trying to sneak into your car? That's just so odd. There's some funny scenes in the nature park, like a couple of bears steal the anthill mob's clothes, and there's this funny scene with Penelope Pitstop being stuck on a geyser that Dick Dastardly tricked her into driving into. That was pretty funny. Overall, this episode gets 6 out of 10 from me. Episode 5 of Series 1, Mish Mash Missouri Dash. This is another episode that is just okay. Yeah, there really isn't anything wrong with it. It's just, yeah, a pretty solid episode through and through. Dick Dastardly and Muttley get to meet one of Luke and Blubber Bear's cousins, and Dick Dastardly tries to trick him into thinking that he's not only related to the guy but trying to stop all the Wacky Races from finishing the race. But Luke comes in and he's all like, yeah, Dick Dastardly totally fooled you, cousin. What's really funny is you think at the end Peter Perfect's gonna win, but he stops for a cat. It's almost like a Dick Dastardly kind of ending, but it's Peter Perfect and he still manages to come second to last. Overall, it's a pretty good episode. I give it a 9 out of 10. Episode 6 of Series 1, Idaho A Go-Go. This episode is another pretty damn solid episode. Basically, it starts off with Dick Dastardly trying to block the other Wacky Racers from passing by another canyon with a giant concrete block. Then, after a massive car collision caused by the Arkansas Chugabug when Blubber Bear gives Luke a really peppered sandwich because Luke told him to don't hold up on the pepper or something like that. Dick Dastardly manages to trick Penelope Pitstop with the whole Red Riding Hood routine. It's just really funny seeing Dick Dastardly trying to do something like that, where he's dressed up as Red Riding Hood. Something about that's just really funny. And then you've got the final part of the episode where the last couple of scenes are just Dick Dastardly and Muttley pretending to be a cattle. And they just get chased by a bull. All in all, pretty solid episode. I give it a perfect 10. Yeah, I really can't fault this episode. It's that good. Also, I think the ending to this episode is really weird. See, after all the Wacky Racers had finished the race, we cut back to Dick Dastardly and Muttley, who are still being chased by the bull from earlier. Dick Dastardly says to Muttley, keep running, we'll outrun him yet. But Muttley, instead of sniggering like he usually does, he just sort of stares into space, like he isn't even running alongside Dick Dastardly to outrun the bull. It's really odd. Episode 7 of Series 1, the Baja-ha-ha race. So this is another really good episode. In fact, I dare say a lot of the Wacky Races episodes are pretty solid, but this one in particular, it's another kind of rare instance where it's Dick Dastardly's winning by doing his usual stick of being a total dick to everyone, but then karma hits him. It's really funny. When he does this thing with his car where he turns the front into a drill and everyone just sort of sinks into the sand. He's really good. Then Dick Dastardly meets a guy who actually manages to pull the mean machine out of the mud in one scene with a donkey, and Dick Dastardly offers to buy it from him for 100 pesos, so he can't pull the other Wacky Races out of the mud. really clever moment from Dick Dastardly. And then it turns out the guy just has more donkeys than anything. It's another really good episode. I really can't say a great deal about it. Animation's pretty good, the music is really nice for all the episodes. It's a good soundtrack. I know it's a bit random that we're just talking about all that now, but I thought I might as well mention it now than never at all. So this episode, it gets a 9 out of 10 from me.
Episode 8 of Series 1, Real Gone Ape. In this episode, we see Dick Dastardly introducing to the audience that he can hypnotise people with a special pocket watch. And he does so on a giant gorilla that he finds in a lorry that was by the side of the road. Honestly, I thought this episode was a little bit underwhelming. I really don't think a great deal kind of happened. I mean, we did get some moments with like Penelope Pitstop like covering the damn thing in makeup, which was kind of funny, and that somehow actually manages to save her from the gorilla. And then you got Peter Perfect being like pile driven into the ground. He did have some good moments, but overall it was just sort of, I don't know, I just didn't think it was as funny as the rest of the episodes that I've seen so far. It was alright, I guess, in the long run. One thing that I'm just going to mention right now, for a long time now I thought Penelope Pitstop was rather annoying. I know I've gone on about her in the past. I found her annoying because of her voice. I thought she was a massive like woman stereotype, being in pink, constantly lathering herself in makeup, trying to be really pretty, and just a really dumb damsel in distress who never even attempted to try and help herself whenever she was in a tough situation, which is something I never really liked about her character. But now that I'm watching Wacky Races again, just for the sake of reviewing every last one of them, I feel like my opinion on her is kind of changing a bit. Yeah, there were times when she maybe could have like helped herself out just a little bit. Maybe she didn't have all of her gadgets for a car all centered around makeup, then maybe she could help herself. But I found she did actually manage to help herself for the most part in the series so far. So yeah, I suppose my opinion of her is actually kind of changing, I guess. Real Gone Ape, I'm going to give a 7.5 out of 10. My favourite part of this episode has to be when the Creepy Coop decide to do some sort of witch's hex on Penelope Pitstop, and then the witch and Penelope Pitstop have a conversation over hair, and the gag ultimately ends with the witch like flying into the side of a tunnel because she was that busy with the hair products that Penelope Pitstop gave her, which is actually really funny. Episode 9 of Series 1, Scout Scatter. This episode has a really weird introduction involving the Army Surplus Special. Basically what happens is there's a misunderstanding where Private Meekley thinks Sergeant Blast is telling him to fire a torpedo, but he does, and then the Army Surplus Special ends up spinning out of control for some reason, even though that never really happens when they fire torpedoes like normally in other episodes. And I don't mind the scene where Dick Dastardly starts playing along with the Ant Hill mob pretending to be scouts, but I think it goes on for a little bit too long. I don't mind when Dick Dastardly's doing that kind of stuff, but it only ever really seemed to affect the Ant Hill mob. It wasn't really like helping him any other way, like he wasn't doing it to affect the other Wacky Races. It kind of felt like the episode was a bit too short and they were just trying to pad it out. I mean, there is that funny gag with like Muttley throwing a bucket of water on Dick Dastardly even though he's already in the ravine because he managed to somehow set his arse on fire. with the dynamite sticks. Like, what? That usually doesn't happen in cartoons when people end up blowing themselves up with dynamite. I liked the gag with Dick Dastardly and Muttley setting up like some sort of air bomb and like a seesaw, and it ends with Dick Dastardly falling into a cactus. And now I just want to quickly talk about the ending. So remember when I talked about Creepy Trip to Lemon Twist, how I don't consider it the worst episode of the entire series? Well, remember when I said I didn't mind the idea of characters being disqualified because the front of the car had been extended? Well, see, the thing is, I got done watching the ending to this with Rufus Roughcut extending his own neck in order to win, which I thought was a bit shit. I mean, it's kind of inconsistent. It's almost like Dick Dastardly isn't allowed to win because it would mean going back on their moral that cheaters don't prosper, but the cartoon is called Wacky Races, for God's sake, you know. It's people should be allowed to win however they want, you know. If you're going to host something called Wacky Races, expect to see wacky racing, you know. The fact that Rufus Roughcut doesn't get disqualified for that just doesn't make any sense to me, and I think that happens in a later episode as well with Peter Perfect, and I'll get to it a bit later. You know, I'm not going to rant about this too much, I just want to keep it within this episode. Final thoughts, this episode gets a 7 out of 10. My favourite part of this episode has to be when the Creepy Coop decide to target the Arkansas Chugabug with a gadget specifically entitled Scare the Bear Power, and it involves the dragon hiding in the Creepy Coop belfry, scaring Blubber Bear, but then Blubber Bear acts all like angry, and he starts strangling the dragon and launching the Creepy Coop back to last place, which is just really funny. It's like one of those rare instances where Blubber Bear is not scared like he usually is, and is instead like either angry or just any other emotion other than scared. Episode 10 of Series 1, Freewheeling to Wheeling. This episode starts off okay. You've got Dick Dastardly discovering some heavy machinery after one of his schemes goes awry, like bulldozers and a wrecking ball. So Dick Dastardly comes up with ideas on how to screw over the other Wacky Races, which is pretty cool. But then I think the episode starts to dip a bit. You've got this scene where Dick Dastardly's trying to hook the Turbo Terrific with the crane as the Turbo Terrific's coming out of a tunnel. But Dick Dastardly somehow manages to hook onto a train instead. Like, where did the tracks come from? Or the train even, because there wasn't any tracks there. And what happened to Peter Perfect? And the really weird thing is about this episode, there's these scenes, you know, just before the Wacky Races are about to get to the finish line, like they're on the final stretch. And you can see the Mean Machine temporarily, but then the episode cuts to Dick Dastardly and Muttley back on the crane, and they're still hooked to the train from earlier. So who was driving the Mean Machine? This episode gets a 6 out of 10. Episode 11 of Series 1, By Roller Coaster to Ups and Downs. This episode is pretty good. The scenes in the theme park were humorous, especially Professor Patent Pending booting Dastardly up the arse. And the ending was pretty funny too, with Private Meekley taking what Sergeant Blast said literally by get to the finish line and step on it. I thought the sound editing was maybe a bit off in this episode. Like the dialogue from the characters was too quiet, or the music in the background was just a bit too loud. I don't know. Overall, I give this episode a 9 out of 10. Episode 12 of Series 1, The Speedy Arkansas Traveller. This episode is brilliant, from the scene at the start with Penelope Pitstop sucking up Peter Perfect's car with a vacuum cleaner, to Dastardly and Muttley pretending to be army officers to trick Sergeant Blast and Private Meekley.
then to the numerous schemes Dastardly pulls off, like dropping a beehive on the other racers or setting a giant bear trap. Pretty funny stuff all round. This episode gets a 10 out of 10. Episode 13 of Series 1, the Zippy Mississippi Race. Another pretty good episode. Funny seeing Peter Perfect win despite his car falling apart twice and being squashed at the front. The only thing I found weird about this episode is there's a scene involving Dastardly tricking everyone into driving onto a steamboat, but some of the cars have shown in the past that they can fly with various gadgets, so why didn't the cars that could fly with gadgets just fly off the steamboat back onto the road? But whatever, this episode gets another 10 out of 10 from me. Episode 13 of Series 1, Traffic Jambalaya, or Jambalaya. I really don't know how you pronounce that word, but anyway. Another pretty good episode. This one involves Dastardly pretending to be a gorilla to fool the other Wacky Racers. The funny thing is, almost everyone in the Wacky Race decides to just put the race aside at the chance at the $50,000 that Dastardly promises for the return of the gorilla. My favourite part has to be the scene with the Bouldermobile damaging the creepy coupe accidentally, and the scene ends with both cars crashing, and the gruesome twosome are like exchanging car insurance details or something with the Slag Brothers. It's really funny. Overall, this episode gets a 10 out of 10 from me. Episode 14 of Series 1, Hot Race at Chillicothe. I think. Again, it's another word I don't know how to pronounce, but whatever. This episode is alright. I felt the scenes in the baseball field went on a little bit longer than necessary, but there were some amusing baseball gags at least, like Dick Dastardly throwing ball-shaped bombs at everyone, and Rufus Roughcut using a giant log as a bat. That was pretty good. The animation I thought in this episode was a bit off in places. Like when Dastardly and Muttley notice the police officer that they borrowed his car from, he starts chasing them. But in the next scene, Dick Dastardly and Muttley are now outside the car, like they've completely abandoned it and they're just running away from the officer now. Which I thought was really weird, because they were in the car and now they're on foot. Just really confusing. And all of a sudden, there's like a giant city behind them instead of trees and shrubbery. And there's another really weird scene that occurs. Patent Pending tries to turn his car into a bow and arrow, but for some reason, during the scene where Patent Pending's like trying to pull the lever in order to change the car, you can see Dick Dastardly's arm pulling the lever instead of Patent Pending's, which I thought was really odd. It seems to be a running theme with Wacky Races. Like, the cartoon itself is pretty good, but I think for the most part, the animation just comes across as rushed sometimes. But all in all, I give this episode an 8.5 out of 10. Episode 16 of Series 1, The Wrong Lumber Race. This was an okay episode. Nothing really all that spectacular happens. You've got Dick Dastardly just following Rufus Roughcut as he tries to saw down all the trees in the forest with his car so that he can make himself a shortcut to bypass all the Wacky Races. You've got some mishaps with Dick Dastardly trying to cut a tree down, but he either ends up squashing the mean machine or he ends up getting himself squashed in the trunk. Nevertheless, still pretty good. I give it an 8 out of 10. Episode 17 of Series 1, Rhode Island Road Race. Why did it take so long for everyone to realise that they weren't actually taking a detour? Rather, they were just going round in circles in a building site? I mean, at least we had Muttley shoot the ever-loving hell out of the mean machine and not only found the strength to grab hold of the mean machine as Dick Dastardly was about to finish the race, the thing is, Muttley manages to find the strength to not only grab hold of the mean machine, but he actually slows it down to the point where it's temporarily stopped. But Muttley also manages to rip the jet engine part off Dick Dastardly's car as well, which was pretty funny. All in all, this episode gets a 6.5 out of 10. Episode 18 of Series 1, The Great Cold Rush Race. This was a weird episode. So the Slag Brothers are now the Gravel Brothers, apparently. And Dick Dastardly couldn't have just driven to the finish line. He had to be in a mean machine-shaped balloon to win. Yeah, okay. Also, it's weird how, as Muttley gives Dastardly a pat on the back because he's winning, Muttley just sort of disappears right up until the ending when he finally appears. And every time I watch this episode, I keep thinking Dick Dastardly accidentally inhales him with the rest of the air that he was blowing into the balloon, but then he exhaled it all as Muttley patted him on the back and it caused Dastardly to become inflated, if that makes sense. But then you see Muttley sniggering at the end. Yeah, it's a weird episode. I mean, it's good in places. Like, I like that scene with Dick Dastardly trying to blow up the ice bridge and the dynamite doesn't quite go off. That was funny enough. I give this episode a 7 out of 10. Episode 19 of Series 1, Wacky Race to Ripsaw. This episode is pretty funny. I really like the scenes with Dick Dastardly tricking the Army Surplus Special into this garage, and Dick Dastardly ends up in a car wash. My favourite part has to be Dick Dastardly and Muttley trying to destroy a bridge by cutting down one of the beams. And it's actually really funny because it's like, I'm pretty sure Muttley doesn't cut the beam fully, if that makes sense, and that's why the bridge doesn't start to break up until Dick Dastardly starts shoving all of his weight onto it by stamping on it repeatedly. What also makes me funny is there's some really silly, stupid cartoon logic with Rufus Roughcut making a bridge after one's either been destroyed or just taken out, but because his car has saw blades or buzz saws, whatever you want to call them, for wheels, it's kind of funny he doesn't end up sawing the bridge as soon as he's driven on it, you know, breaking it that way, which is really funny. Overall, I give this episode a 9 out of 10. Episode 20 of Series 1, Oil's Well That Ends Well. I liked this episode a lot, more than I thought I would. I like how all of Dick Dastardly's schemes involve oil. One of my most favourite ones has to be Muttley drilling a hole into the ground, so everyone just gets thrown up into the air by a massive fountain of oil. But everyone just ends up driving straight through the oil and just covering Dick Dastardly from head to toe in oil. He's really funny. Mostly because it's like, what did Dick Dastardly expect? It's like everyone could have just as easily driven round it as well. Then I like the scheme with Dick Dastardly tricking everyone into driving into a giant pipe. It's funny because not even Dick Dastardly knows where the pipe leads. Shortly after he announces what he's going to do, he gets run over by a lorry, which I thought was kind of odd, so that is actually a legitimate method of travel? Or was it just, hey, let's everyone just screw over Dick Dastardly again? I don't know, just weird cartoon karma, if you will, but whatever. It's still a really, really good episode. I give this episode an 8 out of 10. One thing I will just point out before I end this, though, there's this weird scene where just after the Anthill Mob have hitched a ride from Penelope Pit Stop because something happened with the Anthill Mob and Ring-a-Ding and the rest are trying to get back to Clyde and the Bulletproof Bomb. But then the Compact Pussycat and Bulletproof Bomb, they're like side by side, so you know, the Anthill mob can like thank Penelope Pitstop and everything, but the compact pussycat is like tiny compared to the bulletproof bomb. Like, what the hell happened there? Episode 21 of Series 1, Whizzin to Washington. I like this episode quite a bit, actually. I like how Dick Dastardly tries to get the Anthill mob arrested, so they pretend to be circus acrobats when they find out about a circus in the area. Then Dick Dastardly pretends to be a ringmaster. Not entirely sure why. Yeah, I always thought these schemes were really weird that Dick Dastardly tried to do, where it was really only just trying to inconvenience one Wacky Racer instead of the other 10. But whatever. I really like the ending the best, with Muttley ripping the motor off the mean machine. Just watching Dick Dastardly be in hysterics as he's trying to chase Muttley. It's a really good episode. It gets an 8.5 out of 10. Episode 22 of Series 1, The Dipsy Doodle Desert Derby. So, this episode is actually pretty funny. Even with a genie, Dick Dastardly can't win the Wacky Race, which is honestly really funny. There's this weird gag where Dick Dastardly wishes for a roaring river to stop the Wacky Racers from crossing, but once again it's like some of the Wacky Racers have gadgets that allow their cars to fly, but what's really weird is they solve the problem by just coming up with some sort of mirage that there's a bridge there, and then as soon as Dick Dastardly decides to just drive over the river because he thinks, yeah, it's just a mirage, you know, like the genie said, or I asked the genie to make a mirage, so it's not really there, the river for some reason becomes real, which is just really weird but funny at the same time. Then there's this gag where Dick Dastardly wishes for a £1,000 anvil to land on the Wacky Racers, and it ends up hitting the genie and then Dick Dastardly, which was pretty funny. One thing I'm just going to point out before I wrap this episode up. So, Dick Dastardly wishes for a flying carpet. So Dick Dastardly just does what he probably should have done right up until he met the genie, which was wish for something that'll get him to the finish line really fast. So the genie comes up with a flying carpet. Now, there's a scene where you see some sort of small montage of the Wacky Racers passing through the desert, but just as the camera cuts back to Dick Dastardly on the flying carpet, you can just sort of see the mean machine right at the back of the Wacky Races, which was just kind of weird. I think it's just a classic case of they were using stock footage from other episodes, but they forgot to cut the scene a little bit shorter than they really should have done. I don't know, maybe Muttley was driving the mean machine. I mean, yeah, it's really weird. You don't actually see him until the end of the episode again, so I suppose that kind of makes sense. Bottom line, I give this episode a 10 out of 10. Episode 23 of Series 1, Eeny, Miny, Missouri, Go. This is another pretty good episode. My favourite part has got to be hands down Dick Dastardly flying over a part of the track with Muttley below, placing firecrackers onto the road to cause part of the track to explode. But as soon as Muttley's been lowered down onto the track, the rope that was used to keep Muttley in place while he placed the firecrackers onto the road, that catches fire from the fuse of one of the firecrackers and it causes the mean machine to explode, which I thought was pretty funny. Don't really know what caused the mean machine to explode, but it was still a funny gag, I thought. I don't really have much to say about this episode. It's pretty solid, pretty funny. I give it an 8.5 out of 10. Episode 24 of Series 1, The Super Silly Swamp Sprint.
My favourite part of this episode has got to be Peter Perfect helping Dick Dastardly and Muttley after a scheme of theirs goes wrong to avoid paying at the toll booth. What's really funny is Peter Perfect does actually help Dick Dastardly and Muttley, but then it looks like he's screwing him over because he's just launched him into the air. But then Dick Dastardly and Muttley and the Mean Machine rebound off a tree and they end up in first place, which is actually really funny. It's also kind of funny how the relationship with Dick Dastardly and the Wacky Races are, because most of them seem to be really negative towards Dick Dastardly, but it's kind of weird seeing Peter Perfect kind of step in and say, yeah, sure, I'll help you out. Kind of funny, really. I like that with Dick Dastardly pretending to be an alligator, and he ends up making a female alligator fall in love with him, which got a bit weird, but was still kind of funny as well. Even funnier seeing as how the female alligator had lipstick on, which is like just classic comedy cartoon logic for you. This episode gets a 10 out of 10 from me.
Episode 25 of Series 1, the Dopey Dakota Derby. I think this episode is brilliant, though I must ask how Muttley didn't give the game away by being with Dastardly the whole time as he pretends to be a bandit called Deadweed Dick. All in all, it's a good, solid, funny episode. I'm particularly fond of the part where Deadweed Dick, in quotation marks, tries to prove how badass he is by twirling 2 handguns on his hands, but then he ends up throwing them into the air and hitting himself and Muttley on the head with them. I give this episode a 10 out of 10. Episode 26 of Series 1, Dash to Delaware. This episode was good. It was actually pretty funny seeing Penelope and Peter winding up as a wedding cake. My favourite part has to be the ending with Dick Dastardly asking Muttley for directions, and then he ends up stuck in the mud. I also loved the dog fight with the creepy coop and the crimson hay baler. This episode gets a 9 out of 10 from me. Episode 27 of Series 1, Speeding for Smoglana. So, Penelope Pitstop has a vibrator in a car, huh? And Dastardly starts calling the commentator Oopsie, or is it Poopsie? Okay. There's a scene where just after patent pending turns the converter car into a rocket, and it sends Dick Dastardly, Muttley and the Mean Machine up into the air on the drawbridge. But what's really weird is when all 3 come crashing back down, Dick Dastardly is present underneath the plank that the Mean Machine was like sitting on top of. Yeah, Muttley and the Mean Machine completely disappear. It's really weird. My favourite part has to be the ending with all the racers crashing into each other. It's just really funny seeing all of that happen, all because Dick Dastardly lost control of his car. Part of me kind of wishes it ended in an 11-way tie, but I'm still really satisfied with this episode as a whole. Bottom line, it gets an 8.5 out of 10 from me. Episode 28 of Series 1, Race Raleigh to Raleigh. I think that's how you pronounce it. What was going on with the Army Surplus Special at the beginning? They were about to pass the Mean Machine, but as soon as Muttley appears and he fires the bazooka out the back of the Mean Machine, the Army Surplus Special is now behind the Mean Machine. But whatever. I like the scenes with everyone trapped in the farm. There's like a lot of really funny gags with like the Crimson Hay Baler herding sheep, and Rufus Roughcut manages to saw through loads of watermelon. It's just really funny. I really liked all the farming schemes that Dick Dastardly was pulling off as well. Like he was trying to pull over a giant like tanker full of water, whatever you want to call it, and he just absolutely fails to do so. The thing is, I used to really hate this episode because of the ending. See, just after Dick Dastardly fires a rocket at the anthill mob, like bound it back at him, and then there's like that giant hole in the ground. The reason why I used to hate it is because I swear Dick Dastardly had enough room to like drive round it, or had the reaction time to at the very least apply the brakes. It felt like such a piss take, but to be honest with you, I don't really mind the ending all that much. I mean, Dick Dastardly really should have been paying attention to the road. I mean, it kind of sucks that he keeps having to lose because, you know, he's the designated villain, or at the very least that's how Hanna-Barbera keep treating him, but whatever. This episode gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Episode 29 of Series 1, Ballpoint Penn or Bust. This episode was alright. I think it was a bit cheap that Dastardly uses the same landslide trick with dynamite like he did in Seesaw to Arkansas. And I swear they used the same animation from that episode as well, just with different backdrops. The gag with the tracks and the police siren was amusing. Seeing Dick Dastardly get a ticket at the end of the episode is honestly my favourite part. All in all, this episode gets a 6.5 out of 10.
Episode 30 of Series 1, Fast Track to Hackensack. So Ring-a-Ding from the Anthill mob changes his name to Ding-a-Ling in this episode, but then everyone starts calling him Ring-a-Ding again. Okay. This episode is brilliant from start to finish. From Dastardly's stop sign firework to Dastardly changing the speed limit sign. This episode gets a 10 out of 10 from me. It really is just that brilliant. So this is where things start to get weird. The next 2 or 4 episodes, depending on how you look at this series, are sometimes treated as Series 1, but just recently I found out, according to Google, the 2 or 4 episodes count as Series 2 for some reason. Just thought I'd bring that up. It's just so weird.
Episode 31 of Series 1, the Ski Resort Road Race. This episode is okay. I mean, it starts off pretty epically with Dick Dastardly controlling an RC mean machine loaded with dynamite. But then I thought the episode kind of dipped a bit, and I think it started to kind of dip as the episode went on. The ski jump segment's okay, though I'm not sure how Dastardly got to the ski jump in such a short length of time, because he's on the road 1 minute after causing a landslide, and then he just sort of teleports to the top of the ski jump. It's really weird, and it seems to be a running theme with Wacky Races. Like, I don't know if it's just because of pacing, or maybe the writers and the animators just didn't have enough time to put these episodes together, which I think would explain why there seems to be a couple of animation errors here and there. But anyway, then you get to this scene where Dick Dastardly tries to sabotage the track yet again by coming up to a segment of the track where there's like this giant lake, and he tries to like dismantle the frozen lake so that nobody can cross over. But once again, the other Wacky Racers have shown in the past that they can use gadgets to fly, and in that scene you can see very clearly that some of them can just drive around the lake. It's really odd how these episodes treat every scenario that Dick Dastardly tries to throw at you. I mean, they're entertaining enough, sure, but I don't know, just something always feels a bit odd with them. But my favourite part has to be the ending, where you got like Dick Dastardly frozen in a giant block of ice and then Muttley frantically trying to push him to the finish line, which I thought was pretty funny. This episode gets a 7 out of 10 from me. Episode 32 of Series 1, Overseas Highway Race. This was another episode that I used to hate because of the ending, but looking at it now, it's actually another episode that I really like. From Peter Perfect having his car get destroyed every 10 seconds, to Dick Dastardly's mishaps, particularly the ones with the giant fan. Just a really brilliant episode all round. This episode gets a final score of 9 out of 10 from me. Episode 33 of Series 1, Race to Racine. This episode is brilliant from start to finish. I loved seeing all the tricks Dick Dastardly and Muttley tried to pull on the other racers. They were all very clever, like Muttley trying to take pictures of Penelope Pitstop for a fake magazine or something. Then Muttley trying to pass himself off as one of the Anthill mob, but he ends up taking out Dick Dastardly, becoming a triple agent. Just brilliant, and honestly the ending is just so good. Muttley spraying everyone with slow motion gas and then spraying Dick Dastardly with it at the end. This episode gets a 10 out of 10 from me. Episode 34 of Series 1, the Carlsbad or Bust Bash. This episode's kinda confusing, I think. It starts off pretty good, though I'm not sure how everyone just suddenly becomes suspicious towards all the hay in the middle of the road that Dick Dastardly planted that was supposed to secretly be hiding a hole in the road. What's really weird is, later on, Dick Dastardly and Muttley find out that there's this river that'll take everybody to the finish line really quickly. But then they get to this scene where there's like a cave and everyone's seeing loads of tunnels and nobody really knows where to go, and you just see Dick Dastardly later on running into a caveman who suspiciously kind of looks like Fred Flintstone, which I thought was kind of funny. But this episode almost feels like all over the place. It's like Dick Dastardly says to Muttley, don't worry, we'll just follow the lake and we'll go straight to the finish line, but then they're out of the lake again, so what's up with that? And what was up with that boulder that the caveman was trying to throw at all the Wacky Races? Like, later on, Dick Dastardly and Muttley get chased by it, and it's like magically following them in and out of all the tunnels in the cave. It's kind of weird. But that bridge out joke was really funny though. So apparently Dick Dastardly tells Muttley to put a bridge out sign out so the Wacky Racers don't really know what to do next. But then it turns out the bridge really is out, which is pretty funny. This episode gets a 7.5 out of 10 from me. And that is every single episode of Wacky Races reviewed.
So let's take a look at the data that I've accumulated over this video. So as you can see, out of all 34 episodes, there were 9 episodes that I rated a perfect 10, 0 that I rated 9.5, 7 that I rated 9, 4 that I rated 8.5, 3 that I rated 8, 2 that I rated 7.5, 5 that I rated 7, 2 that I rated 6.5, and 3 that I rated 6. So the score range has been 6 to 10. 6 that I would say was slightly over average, still fair, and 10 which I'd say was pretty damn good. So overall, Wacky Races as a whole gets a final score of 8.59 out of 10. 8.59 being the total score of every last episode that I've reviewed, then divided by 34, which is how many episodes there were in the series. Well guys, that pretty much sums up my video. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I really truly did. It took me a lot longer to get this video up and running than I thought it would. Something that I've really been wanting to do for a while, and I'm glad to see it get done.
I'm General Chaos, and I'll see you all later. Happy 5 years, everyone.